Okay, so this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a huge challenge for me to go through this documentary that I've found that is talking or discussing or introducing what paedophiles have got to say. Now, the documentary is actually titled Pedophile Screener. Now, I don't know why that title is there like that. It doesn't really make any sense to me. But I actually came across this documentary because a gentleman on Twitter had shared a couple of my posts, and he is a academic researcher in this field, and he is the producer of this documentary. And I scrolled through his Twitter. He's saying some very interesting things at the very least, some things that are definitely going to create emotion in us. And then I went to his documentary, I watched it, and now I want to bring it to everybody that is here engaging with this podcast. This is the side of the discussion about CSA, child sexual abuse, that makes everybody very, very angry, but so angry that we can't even talk about it. Every time I pose this situation that we have on our hands, whether you like it or not, the situation that in the crime of sexual abuse, we have the offender. And even though we are angry at the offender for committing the offence, and rightly so, so we should be, we also need to have a discussion on what we are going to do with the offender once they've committed the crime, served their prison sentence, and are released out back into our communities. And we also need to have the conversation on how we're going to get to these people before they commit the crime. Because I'm going to say that it's not like they wake up one morning and all of a sudden they're going to perform a sexual act on a child. There's probably many stages that came before that. Where were we in all those stages, trying to maximise the chance that they will not commit the crime in the first place? Now, the common reaction that I get to this of just kill them, castrate them, line them up and shoot them is an anger response that isn't in our world, that isn't going to stop the crime from happening. We don't give the death sentence out to any crime in this country. And if you caught the video that I made quite recently, the podcast episode that I released quite recently that was titled Sex Offenders and the Death Sentence, you will see that it's not that straightforward even if we wanted to implement it. So it's very complicated, but we need to talk about offenders and we need to talk about the people that are thinking about offending, because we all have a common goal. We all have the same mission, and that is to stop the crime from happening to children in the first place. And sometimes I feel like saying that's our responsibility to sort that out, because we're always talking about the education of children. We're always talking about, let's get these children educated. But somebody very cleverly told me once, how dare we put the ownership on children to protect themselves? How dare we do that? We've created a world, we live in a world that adults created, and there are criminals out there that we haven't stopped from committing the crime in the first place. It's not the responsibility of children to protect themselves from adults that can't handle themselves. It's the responsibility of us adults to get the other adults that are going to commit this crime to handle themselves and not commit it in the first place. So that's what I'll say about that. And I believe that to be very, very true, actually. So the documentary, we're going to go through it. We're going to see what it's saying. I have watched it before. It's extremely impactful. It's extremely thought-provoking. Stick with me on it. If you get angry, if you feel a certain emotion, if you see sense in what this documentary is saying, if you disagree or agree with it, get your comments in the comment section. Don't be silently angry behind the computer screen, behind your earphones, however you're consuming this podcast episode, because we all need to get involved in the discussion. And the way the discussion unfolds in the comments section shows me how we're feeling about it at the moment and helps me progress this work. Let's start the documentary. Get ready for it. Let's see what it's about.
I hated myself, totally hated myself for many, many years. I was angry with God, because why in the hell would you make me this way?
I do try not to pay attention to children. That's purely because I can be very easily distracted by them.
Rather than making it easier for him to come into a therapist, we've made it practically impossible. And somehow society believes that this is making them safer. There are still really only 2 teams in the entire world working on this at all. My group in Canada and the Dunkelfeld project in Germany.
You have to take into account that these people are among us.
They're innocent children. They shouldn't have to be condemned because they have placed a criminal across our street.
If you want to protect children, why is there no help for these people who are sexually attracted to children? Why is there nowhere that these people can go? Why do you wait until a crime has been committed and then you go out and prosecute somebody, but until then, you do nothing?
Wow, what an opening. What an incredible opening. And that just blows me away. It just is so impactful. Here's the title of the documentary shown on the screen here. If you're listening on your podcast app, I am going to try to walk you through the visuals. But if you are listening to this on your podcast app and you have an opportunity or you have some time later to actually go and also watch this on YouTube, where I'm going to post the visual of this, please do, because the visuals are strong on this documentary. But this opening scenes have just laid out the situation on the table. And the most impactful words were, we're all very happy to get involved when the crime has been committed, but by then that's too late. The child has been abused. The child's life has been redirected due to that sexual abuse. Where were we before that? When are we going to admit there are people in our communities that and there are people in our communities that are tempted to commit this crime? Are we not going to get involved with them in some way to change their mind? Let's continue with the documentary. For those listening, it's just a few visuals.
It's just beautiful.
Okay.
It's the house that we'd always wanted. They can just play outside by themselves for hours. Why would we ever want to move from here? My 4-year-old knows something's going on. He doesn't know exactly what's going on, but it totally affects him. He thinks there's a bad guy there and says, well, what does he do to kids? But you should never even have to have that conversation with a 4-year-old. Like, they should just be able to be free. My daughter should be able to run around in her underwear through the sprinkler in my front yard.
Just to give some context for those that are listening on your podcast app, this is a mother with a family, and she's discussing the fact that convicted paedophiles have moved into her neighbourhood.
They're innocent children. They shouldn't have to be condemned because they have placed a criminal across our street.
People in the city are being warned about James William Conway. The 40-year-old has a long criminal record, including sex offenses against girls. Corrections believes Conway is a high risk to reoffend.
My husband, he's just been having like a real hard time with this. How do you protect your wife and kids legally? He doesn't know. He leaves during the day to go to work. He's not here. I mean, it takes him probably an hour to get home if anything were to happen. He watches my kids play every day. One day he'll decide that it's enough of being in that house, and then whose kid is gonna be hurt? Whether corrections or community living believe this is the right spot for him, it's not. There is no place for him here, and the community will not stop.
So, what I just want to say is that I think there's a big difference here in the conversation between somebody that has committed the offence against a child and somebody who has not. So I open this podcast up almost suggesting that we need to work with these people that have never committed the crime, that feel tempted to. They're starting to get worried about what they're being drawn to online, and they're starting to worry about what's going on in their head, and they want to work through their thoughts so that they never actually commit the crime. That is a different conversation to somebody who has already committed the crime. And for the people that have already committed the crime against the child, the convicted sex offender, the convicted paedophile, I do see the anger. I do feel the anger. And I wouldn't want one moving round the corner from my house. And I wouldn't want them living in any community, in fact, because you never know, however many therapists they go to see, when they're going to commit that crime again. And that's why this community on this documentary are angry. They don't want them anywhere near their kids. They don't want them around the corner from them, and rightly so. So that's where the anger comes from. Now, the conversation of a few people that are out there that are saying we still need to have a level of... And I just know empathy is the wrong word, because empathy kind of relates to kindness, and I don't have time for that with somebody that's committed the crime. But a lot of people are saying if we don't have some form, for lack of a better word right now that I have, if we don't have some form of empathy for that person that's committed the crime, we're never actually going to work with them so that to increase the chances that they're not going to commit the crime again. We're never going to be able to make this 100% sure that they're not going to be able to commit the crime again. And I can almost just hear the people who are watching this or listening to this being like, but if you kill them, that will be the 100% guarantee that they'll never commit the crime. But you know, we've been through all of that already. That's not as simple. It's largely more complicated than that. And very interestingly, when I released that podcast episode a little while ago, again, I say it, sex offenders and the death sentence, there's a lot of people out there that don't agree with the death sentence at all. So that's not like a 100% vote for the death sentence coming in for this crime. So let's continue.
I volunteered for every job that they offered me that was dangerous. Mexico, Colombia, Central America, South America, Peru. I was a demolitions expert. I was a weapons expert. Most people would see me as a guy, a guy, not somebody.
Okay, I got to stop it here because I've got to tell you what's on the screen here. If you're listening to this, this is Bob. And they have written his name on the screen, but they've also written under his name age of attraction, boys 7 to 12 years old.
Who was actually attracted to children. Through my teenage years, I would say I was extremely depressed, very angry. My attraction wasn't aging with me. It was staying in that same area of, 7 to say 12, and usually at the lower end.
Wow.
They may think of me as a monster, a freak, whatever, but the way that they feel about me, I've felt worse for myself. Everybody always tries to talk about a cure. And I got news for you. If there was ever a cure for something like this, I'd be in line. This attraction makes your life a living hell, makes you an outcast.
I do try not to pay attention to children. That's purely because I can be very easily distracted by them. There are times where somebody will stand out and catch my attention, and I can't help but look. And it's one of those situations where you need to slap yourself to not make it look completely obvious that you're transfixed by the beauty of a child.
Oh my God.
There is an attraction to children there that's just far deeper than sexual. And that's what people don't understand. I think people conflate pedophilia with this kind of sadistic urge to hurt children and to take advantage of those that are most vulnerable in society. When I was in my mid-20s, this was the stage where I was becoming increasingly aware of this.
Okay, this is Edward, by the way. Age of attraction, girls 6+.
Paedophilic tendency within. And I was struggling. I have to say I was struggling, with the idea that there was the potential there within me to sexually interact with a child. There was nobody to speak to as such. The woman that I was with at the time, she had plenty of her own issues. But she was kind enough to want to know what my issues were. It was like flicking a switch. From sitting next to me on the couch, she stood up pretty much like a soldier to attention and crossed the room, sat down, lit a cigarette, and just sat there looking at me. Within the week, the news was out. For a whole town where you've been living for the majority of your life, where you've been based, to then find out that you have a pedophilic tendency, it's the end. But I thought, well, if I can get help, maybe there's a reason, maybe there's a way of changing this. Maybe I can be different. I said to the psychiatrist, look, I can't imagine myself doing anything, but I can't get these thoughts out of my head. He looked at me like I was an alien, like I had two heads. And I thought, why am I doing this? Why have I even bothered to tell anybody? Nobody wants to know, and everybody's hating me for this. I didn't want to be looked at again like this guy had been looking at me. It was like, horror. This man is sexually attracted to little girls.
Okay, let's stop it there for a moment. Okay. So we just had 3 gentlemen on there. One, age of attraction was boys 7 to 12. Next was age of attraction, girls 6+. Next was age of attraction. I can't remember now what the third one was. But they're all explaining something similar, and that is that if they could not have this in their head, if there was a cure, if there was a pill to take so that they could not have this in their head, they would take it. And actually, they hate themselves for it in some way. Don't let that make you feel angry at them, right? And the reason why I say that is because if these 3 gentlemen have not committed the crime against a child, they've never gone near a child before, they've not committed a crime against a child, they're all explaining the same thing, and that is they can't go anywhere for the help that they're looking for. They want to understand what's in their head. They want to deal with it. They are not interested in committing the crime. And yes, you may say they may not want to commit the crime right now, but what, in a year's time? And I'm like, yeah, what about in a year's time? What about if we push them all in a corner and turn the light out on them and turn around and just hope and pray with our fingers crossed that they're never going to commit the crime? Then I think we've got something we're going to be, we're not helping. But for these kind of gentlemen who are admitting to themselves they've got an issue, they know it's in their head and they would seek help if it was available, should we not have help for them? Now, look, I am understanding the more I do this work that not every person that gets a sexual thrill out of a child is like this, right? There are some people who just don't give an F. They're going to go out there, they're going to commit that crime, they're going to commit crimes online, they're going to attack as many children as possible, and they don't care. They're in communities and chat rooms online where they're all talking about how to get away with it. They just don't care. And even if you catch them and you put them away for 5 years into prison, they're going to come out and they're just going to look for better ways to not get caught next time. I get it. I think we've got to accept that there's a spectrum of people with this desire in their head, with this attraction in their head. And this has got nothing to do with normalizing paedophilia, normalizing wanting to do something with an underage person. It's got nothing to do with normalizing it. I don't want to see this be normal, but what I'd like to see is the support for people that want it be normal. And I often turn this on its head and think to myself, the 25-year-old man that was sexually abusing me when I was 8 years old, if he was one of these people, let's say 2 years before he got to me, he was thinking, oh my God, when I walk down the street, like this man was saying in this documentary, when I walk down the street, I see 8-year-old boys and I can't stop looking at them and thinking disgusting things about them. I need to see someone, but I can't go and see someone because I'm a nurse. This guy that did this to me was a nurse. I'll lose my job. Therapists will tell the police about me or the whole town will know and then I'll be alienated. So I better keep this to myself. 2 years later, the temptations grew and grew and grew, and then he came for me. He got access to me and he took his opportunity. If he was the kind of guy that was like these guys, that before he got to me, he recognised what was in his head and would have sought some kind of support before he actually committed the crime on me, would I have wanted the support to be available for these people? Yes. Would that have made it a guarantee that he would have left me alone? No. Would it have increased the chances that he would have left me alone and my life be very, very different? Yes. Increase the chances by at least 1%? I'm taking it. You give me 5% chance, increase of chance that he would have left me alone? I'm taking it. But none of that was available if he would have taken it anyway. But what these three gentlemen are showing us, for the portion of the people that have this attraction in their head to minors, underage children, that they recognise what's going on. Very, very, very interesting. And let me just quickly tell you before we start the documentary again, the producer of this documentary that was at the very start of this, James Canton, his name is. He's from Canada. I've contacted him and I've asked him to come onto the podcast. We should be recording that in a couple of weeks. Keep an eye out for that, because if I can pull that off and we can speak to the person who's done all the research for this documentary, it's going to be really, really interesting. Okay, let's continue.
The day before somebody gives in to his sexual interest in children, he was a person who was struggling with his sexual interest in children. And that's the day we failed him. Rather than making it easier for him to come into a therapist, we've made it practically impossible.
This is a guy I hopefully will be interviewing.
So rather than having a pedophile out in society receiving support or medication, we have a pedophile out in society receiving absolutely no supervision whatsoever.
It's facts, man.
And somehow society believes that this is making them safer.
It's facts. it's facts. It doesn't make us feel good, but it's facts. It makes us angry, but seriously, he's talking sense almost. Surely.
What I was expecting to see in the early days was just a pattern of strengths and weaknesses that might be different among the pedophiles than the non-pedophiles. What we did find, however, was their IQs were a little bit lower, their scores on memory tests were slightly lower. One of the interesting things that we found was a difference in height. Pedophiles seem to be slightly shorter, about 2.5 centimeters shorter than a non-pedophile. Now, just for perspective, the amount by which a pedophile is too short is double the amount that would happen if a woman smoked when she was pregnant. Then other findings started emerging. In a regular everyday population, somewhere between 8 and 10% of people are non-right-handed. But it was over 30% of the pedophiles. That's extremely rare. The only other populations which have non-right-handedness differences that high are people with schizophrenia and people with autism. Each of these clues altogether were pointing us over and over again to something in the brain. The hard part was when we started getting the results, and they were not the results we thought. In those days, everything we knew was on the surface of the brain. But they found these large differences in the connective tissue. The layer of tissue under the outside of the brain is composed of what we call white matter. It's mostly fibrous tissue that connects the various parts of the brain together so it functions as a cohesive whole. And there were huge differences. When we show a regular heterosexual man pictures of a nude female, certain parts of the brain light up. The visual areas of the brain light up, the face recognition part of the brain, the movement parts of the brain, the areas we would expect. When we show a pedophile a picture of a child, the very same areas of the brain light up. All of the areas that light up, both in pedophiles and in adults, are all connected through the same set of white matter tissue that my team detected being different between pedophiles and non-pedophiles.
Oh my goodness, this is more than interesting and I believe extremely valuable, because I think whenever I'm talking about offenders against children, we're thinking that actually they're just people who woke up one morning, went out of their house and decided to try to groom a child for sex. And I have posed, if you're following me, I've posed a number of times the question of, are pedophiles born with this in them, or does something in their life make them this way? Because I pose that question because I want us to think a bit more deeper into what's charging these people into this attraction, what's actually stimulating them, what's actually giving them a thrill. And this is so interesting that this clinical psychologist, hopefully is going to come onto my podcast, is saying that when you show a heterosexual man a picture of a nude woman, it fires certain parts of their brain, because that's like so deeply ingrained in that heterosexual man to find the photograph of a nude woman thrilling and arousing and exciting, right? It's like eons of evolution. But in the brain of a paedophile, a photo of a child is igniting those same brain circuits. So that makes me think, well, what's gone wrong here? Is this like a genetic flaw? Is this something that was a misfiring in the brain? And has this been there since birth, but has what's the right word here? I've got to be so careful with how I try to explain what's in my head here, because I know the wrong word could give the wrong impression when we're trying to talk calmly about these topics. As it in the brains from birth, is it a misfiring? Is it a miswiring, or has it evolved throughout that person's life, because we don't like to think that a baby could be born evil, like with this problem in their head, because then what, you're going to look at your baby boy and be like, they're destined to find children attractive. No one wants to be faced with that. So is it something in their life that has turned their brain into firing like this, or is it a mixture of the two? A different case is different for different people. But when you start thinking about the brain, not just a person's behaviour, like it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. And I think the better we understand that, the better conversation we're going to have around this, and the better chance we have of getting these people to not commit the crime in the first place. Let's continue.
It's as if there's a literal cross-wiring in the brain. This was really the first, pretty undeniable proof that pedophilia is in the brain and not going to change. Pedophilia is something that a person does not ask for. It's biological. It's in their brain, they're born with it, and we can't change it. When you get right down to it, there are still really only 2 teams in the entire world working on this at all. My group in Canada and the Dunkelfeld project in Germany.
Wow, come on. This is crazy.
The biggest difference between Germany and Canada, and much of the rest of the world for that matter, is that Germany still protects doctor-patient confidentiality in a way that most other countries do not. In Germany, because they don't have mandatory reporting, they can get people with no history of ever having offended against children and invite those people to participate in research studies. If a bathymetric test says that somebody's a pedophile and they're not, you've ruined somebody's life. The clinician can say, I don't think the test is correct, but once that's in the hand of a lawyer or a courtroom system, you have ended the person's life as they know it. So we have specifically biased the test in favor of not diagnosing pedophilia. Wow. There are 2 ways a test can be wrong. A test can say somebody is a pedophile when they're not, or a test can say somebody is not a pedophile when they actually are. It's easier and more effective to think of this as 2 numbers. What's the probability of missing something?
If I tell you I'm a drug addict, maybe you will come to me as you're my neighbor and would like to drink a bottle of wine, and I would say, no, I don't drink wine because I'm an alcoholic. I would not lose your respect. I wouldn't. But if I tell you I can't take care for your son because I'm pedophilically inclined, I'm completely right in my answer and in my behavior, but at this moment, I'm stigmatized.
Okay. That gentleman is involved in the Dunkelfeld project, which is the second. The gentleman said, didn't they? There's only 2 places on the planet that are doing research on this. In Canada with his organisation, and this gentleman here is from Germany with the Dunkelfeld project, and they're the other organisation. They have a couple of TV adverts out which were really, really powerful. Maybe I should do a podcast on those. But what he's trying to highlight, which I think is really interesting, but I'd like to know what your opinion on this is, and please continue commenting. The more comments you can put in the comment section of this podcast, the more you're going to encourage a discussion for others to also put comments in, and then we're going to get this ball rolling on just talking about these issues. He said, didn't he, if you're an alcoholic and you come to my house and I offer you wine, you're going to say, no, thank you, because I'm an alcoholic and I don't go near that. But then if you were to say, if you were to go around somebody's house and they would say, oh, could you just watch my children for 5 minutes while I go to the bathroom? And you said, no, I can't do that because I'm a paedophile and I don't go near children. That the reaction is going to be like miles different, right? The reaction is miles different. And I think this gentleman's trying to get at that's an error on our part, because actually that's not allowing these people to come forward and be honest about what they've got going on in their head. But for me, I'm kind of looking at it in a little bit of a different way, because I'm thinking also that is the shame of having these thoughts in your head, is the shame of it, is that there for a reason that isn't is that there for a reason that doesn't come to mind immediately? Like, I wonder why we have shame on certain things in society in general. Let's say adultery, cheating on your wife or cheating on your husband. I'm going to say more so back in the day, there was a shame to that, because essentially what that will often do is break up the family. The children are left with separated parents. I come from a separated parent home as well, so I'm not trying to say that's... I'm not trying to tread on that, but what I'm saying is it's not ideal, right? To have both parents is ideal. So there was a shame around adultery because they knew that it would split parents up, and that shame was there to prevent people from doing it. I am not educated in that. I would love somebody who knew more about the origin of shame to come forward and tell us about that. But is there a shame around this attraction towards children because we don't accept it? We don't want that to be happening. We don't want that in you. Is it? Am I getting anywhere with this? With what I'm saying here? Am I making any sense? I'm not sure. It's really... I've just thought about that off the top of my head, and maybe I've got that completely wrong. Help me out, please. Comment section. I can't say it enough. Okay, let me read this for you. Prevention Project Duncanfeld is the only place in the world that offers treatment to paedophiles who wish to remain anonymous. Next bit. Their access to non-offending paedophiles gives them the major advantage when it comes to research.
Because we are dealing with self-motivated and cooperative persons, they will tell us everything. This is a huge difference between the so-called Dunkelfeld. So these are not legally known persons. The justice system is not involved. If the justice system is involved, you will not tell the medical doctor everything. You can choose between helping maybe one child or to create circumstances under which you can help much more children. Pedophilia is part of human sexuality, and what we have to tell the public is that we should not condemn the preference, we should condemn the false behavior. It's very important to differentiate, because then we can enhance the chance to reach this group.
Okay. Again, it's facts, isn't it? It's facts.
In the beginning, I was very confused. Then I thought, they aren't children. They're already at an age where they are starting to become interested in their sexuality. She was smart, beautiful. Her hips weren't pronounced yet, her breasts were small. She was 13. She had the body of a girl. For so long I thought about how I could get away with this.
When a scientist says pedophilia, we mean specifically sexual interest for children who are pre-pubertal. We use a different word to describe the attraction to early pubescent children. We call that hebephilia. If a regular, everyday heterosexual man finds somebody attractive in a bar, The smallest little move can be interpreted as flirtatious. A touch of a drink, a touch of the lips. The thing that makes a pedophile willing to give in to their sexual interests is to fool themselves into seeing a situation other than how it is. When they meet a child that they happen to find attractive, and children are often naturally friendly or naturally cuddly, to a pedophile, that can seem flirtatious.
Wow.
They convince themselves into thinking that this kid knows what it is that they're doing, they know the nature of the interaction, and they start making more and more sexual overtures towards the child.
Seriously, I'm going to put the link to this documentary in full in the caption here, because if you get a moment, if you're listening to this, if you get a moment in the next few days, please go and watch this, because there is some striking visuals on here. I put 2 links in the description of the podcast. I will put the YouTube one where I'm reviewing this, and I will put the straight documentary, because these visuals are really painting a picture. They're very, very strong and well done.
It's not difficult for a pedophile to turn a stranger into a mentorship relationship, into a closer relationship, into one that the pedophile will see as romantic and potentially sexual, even though to the child, it's just play.
Okay.
One day, I was giving her a private lesson. And I started stroking her arms, her upper body. I complimented her and kissed her. To me, it felt right. But I could tell she wasn't enjoying it.
Oh my goodness.
She must have reported it soon after, because there was this restlessness at school. Everyone wanted to know what happened. At home, I told my wife that the girl had misunderstood the situation. And at first she believed me. But as the criminal proceedings began, I realized that I couldn't get out of this. They were going to convict me, so I told her everything. She was furious, and who could blame her? She felt betrayed, so she left.
My wife and I, we've done foster care, actually. And
Okay. Before we get into this, gentlemen. So those people, everything that's just been explained in this chunk of the documentary, first of all, where James Canton, the clinical psychologist, talks about the fact that the abuser, the paedophile that's going for this young teenager or child may misread signs, may think that that child's playful and gentle and kind nature, they may mistake that for flirting. Not mistake it so much so, but be brainwashed themselves to brainwash themselves to think that it's flirting, to what's the word I'm looking for? To brainwash themselves to think that that child is flirting with them, to kind of convince themselves that what they're aiming to do is okay and that the child wants it in some way. Then we have this other gentleman who just explained, and visually the scene that this documentary had portrayed was that teacher was giving a piano lesson to his student, and he put his hand on her shoulder and went to kiss her, and she was freezing, but he thought he was okay. And it's like, well, can we not educate people into understanding that those thoughts in their head are incorrect? They've completely misread the situation. And can we not give them the tools to understand that if they're feeling the way that this young underage teenager or child is in air quotes, flirting with them, to give them the tools to read that that is not flirting. And that is actually the child just being the child. It's the young teenager being the young teenager, and they need to get out of that situation immediately. Can we not give this education to those who have this attraction in their head that come forward for help? So we could increase the chance that they recognize when they're thinking like that, and they stop themselves and they get themselves out of the situation. Okay, let's go for the next guy who's going to chat here.
And who could blame her? She felt betrayed, so she left.
My wife and I, we've done foster care, actually, and we've had some great experiences with it. We were able to make some children who may have started out having a really rough life have a lot of fun. A young boy who was in our care at the time, he was 8 years old. And I was trying to deal with, my own feelings. Made it really tough, and unfortunately I reached for the internet. Most of the pictures that I searched out were of boys swimming or in their underwear. I wanted to see them happy. I saw some pictures online that were, of children being hurt, but they're not the pictures that I was interested in. The police came to my house. I admitted to what I had done. I think if I could do it all over again, at least that part would be much different. They searched my computer, they found what I had. They took a lot of rolls of film that had absolutely nothing to do with what happened. We can never get them back.
That's your fault, mate.
I had a total of 25 pictures that were considered illegal and pornographic. And I was charged for every one of them.
Okay, words on the screen. Bob was charged with 25 counts of possession of child pornography. He was sentenced to 48 months in prison. He is defending himself, saying they were just boys in swimming situations. They should have never taken all the other photos from his house. And this is where my attitude is different. You committed the crime, mate. Right? You didn't resist committing the crime. Right? You have been charged with 25 counts of possession of child pornography. You committed the crime. You are part of the problem. You didn't resist what happened in your head. You are going to get the comeuppance. We ain't got time for you. I don't care if they took every possession that you ever had and never gave it back to you. You committed the crime. We don't accept that. We don't accept that. You went out there and you searched for something you knew you shouldn't be searching for. I don't care if the police arrived and you admitted to the crime immediately because you knew you did wrong. You committed the crime. And as soon as you commit the crime, you are in a different box completely. I ain't got time for it. And I don't like you. End of. The fact you got 48 months in prison, I hope that there were stringent therapy sessions and analysation before they release you, right? To ensure that you're not still a threat. And the fact that you committed the crime and the fact that you're actually a foster parent, I think you should be nowhere near children in any situation. I think your family should know about it. I think anyone whose house you go round should know about it. I think your internet should be monitored for the rest of your life. I think you should be on a register for the rest of your life. And for anybody that's like, chill out, Jeremy, it was just looking at some internet, some images of young boys doing XYZ. For them to classify it as child pornography, I'm guessing it wasn't just the swimming images that he talked about here. That's a crime in itself that we don't accept, because if you look for that type of imagery, you've got to remember that child pornography, which it's not called that anymore, it's child sexual abuse material, has been created by somebody because there's a demand there. And child sexual abuse material is videos and pictures being taken of real children being sexually abused to satisfy people's perverse fantasies. No, thank you. We don't accept it. You should have the book thrown at you. You should have got more than 48 months in prison. Done.
Some stuff I don't ever want to see again. I don't want to remember what I've seen. I was masturbating 2 or 3 times a day. It got to the stage where I was doing it in public toilets, in public cubicles. And it sounds incredibly foolish, and it is, but when you're that out of control and you have no help, you have no discourse for sorting it. I mean, my experiences of trying to talk to people about this were I was never going to go back to a therapist. I'd already changed my name, thinking that I'd left this part of myself behind me. People are allowed to hate this demographic, this population, this minority in our species. You can say what you want to them, you can think what you like about them, and in an ideal world, you can do what you want to them.
The first month or so, I mean, I was scared to death. Being that I was labeled as a sex offender, there was a huge target on me.
Okay, we're talking about prison
I didn't
now.
realize that until I got there and saw how beat down, not only physically, but emotionally, some of these guys were.
Wow, the imagery's
Broken
strong.
bones, facial disfigurations. They were cut. They were, lucky to still be alive. I had my first black belt by the time I was 10. I hold belts in 3 different disciplines. So the last thing you want to do is take on a large group of people. If you can go to where it's one-on-one, you're the most safe.
Okay, there's a fight scene going on now.
I choked him out. I cut off his air supply, so eventually he was going to go out and I could let go.
Pedophilia is the actual sexual interest, regardless of whether a person buries it and never tells a soul and never does anything about it their entire life, or if they actually act on it. There are pedophiles who never molest children, and there are child molesters who are not actually pedophilic.
Okay, we got to stop it there, because that's education that I think we all need to get with, including myself, right? Because I'm in this with you. I am learning as I go. I started this in a blank slate. I was a mechanical engineer before I did this. I am learning and studying as I go. This is important, as I know there's a few people out there that keep criticizing me for this. Paedophilia is the diagnosis for the attraction to children. Not all paedophiles commit the crime. Then he goes on to say, not all child molesters are paedophiles. So some people who molest a child are just opportunistic and they just go for that situation. It doesn't mean that their primary attraction is underage children. But then we need to take it one step further, because what this psychologist said to us a little bit earlier in the documentary is that paedophilia is the primary attraction to pre-pubescent children, and hebephilia is the attraction to post-pubescent children that are underage. So there are categories here. You may not care about that. I was not that interested in that when I started this. But as we start to talk about this deeper in more technical language, and we start to attract the attention of academia on my pages, I need to get the terminology right. And I think it's interesting or useful for us to have the terminology right. So in summary, paedophilia is the diagnosis that your primary attraction is prepubescent children. Hebephilia is post-pubescent children. Not all paedophiles actually commit the crime. Not all child molesters are paedophiles. Lots of information there for us to run with.
The most heinous cases, the ones associated with violence, the ones associated with kidnapping, murder, and mutilation of the body, those are people who have two diagnoses. One of them is the pedophilia itself, the actual sexual interest in children. The other is what we usually call psychopathy. These are people who are generally unable to see other people as people. They're merely toys to play with to do whatever it is that they want with. They're thankfully rare.
Wow.
He would lure me and invite me to go out in a boat at the local yacht club because I was roaming around the streets then.
A Nova Scotia man whose convictions for sexually assaulting boys in the 70s and 80s were overturned in court is tonight behind bars in Nepal for allegedly sexually abusing a minor there. This news, disturbing as it is, comes as no surprise to one of those who says he suffered abuse at the hands of Ernest Fenwick McIntosh. Amanda Devison has the story.
Okay, this is the victim speaking out here.
Like the father figure, he'd put you in bed, he'd tuck you in, and I would remember trying to fall asleep and not trying to fall asleep, but all of a sudden, before you knew it, your underwear are down and he's orally raping me.
My goodness.
I felt so ashamed and embarrassed to myself, but not only that, I remember when he finished, when he did that to me, he patted me on the head and said, "Good boy,"
Oh
and
my goodness.
I felt like a dog.
Come on.
But then when you talk to your buddies, you know, play hockey or school, then they said, "Oh, we saw you with Fruity Finn. You're a fruit too," and that was the term back there. Pedophilia wasn't a term for me. People said McIntosh was homosexual, but he wasn't. He was a 31-year-old predator that was abusing children. You're never over. It's like a tattoo. It will never go away. It wasn't consensual, and it was a horrible thing that he did, and it shaped me. It shaped me the way I acted and acted out. Is pedophilia a disease? I can't answer that. But if it is, I hope there's help for them.
Now that we've learned so much throughout this documentary, that is a striking question. Is paedophilia a disease? My goodness. We've heard about the brain. We've heard from people that have this in their head. We've heard from a victim now. And that's quite the impactful question, isn't it? Is paedophilia a disease? Wow.
The Dunkelfeld project came about the time I was looking for it. I felt like I couldn't trust my own feelings or the way I assessed certain situations. Early on in the phone interview, they diagnosed me as a Hebephiile. I thought, okay, I'm not weird enough that the people like me don't exist at all. Before therapy began, I was very, very nervous. What kind of men are attracted to children? Most of us in the group had committed an assault, some only once, some more often. There was one of us who was much older. He had abused his granddaughter for many years. There were several sessions focused on empathy. and we were asked to play our victims in a reenactment of our assaults.
Wow.
I couldn't do anything but suffer through it. It was terrifying. I didn't have the option of saying, "Stop, you dirty bastard," or something to that effect.
Oh my goodness.
Because at that moment, the man sitting behind me was my teacher. A teacher that I really liked. For the
Oh, we're
first
back to
time, I
that.
realized that a girl this young couldn't really be expected to fight this experience.
We're back to the
I
piano
understood it
scene.
in my head, but I had never felt it. It was the worst day of therapy. But I realized just how wrong it was to advance on such a young girl. As an adult, under no circumstances could I ever let this happen again.
For the people who say there is no cure for these people, I also, a good part of me believes that to be true completely. But for them to go through some form of therapeutic process in whatever way relates to them, and this guy's explaining that his therapy session actually put him back in the place of the child. And very interestingly, that was the guy that was the piano teacher, and it showed him what that girl was thinking when he abused her, when he molested her, when he assaulted her. The powerless feeling that that girl felt, it gave him that feeling. And if that kind of therapy is going to prevent one person from committing another crime, we're taking that, right? We're taking it straight away. If it's going to prevent 1 in 100 people from committing another crime, we're definitely taking that. That was so striking. I just can't believe it. Now it's making me think maybe if I could get some therapists or counsellors or psychiatrists who deal with offenders onto my podcast, that's going to give us another level of information, education, understanding on how we can better protect children moving forward into the future, because that's the goal. Let's continue.
It's difficult to imagine what it must be like to grow up as a pedophile. When a pre-pedophile even is 8 years old and gets a crush on another 8-year-old, nobody notices. But when the pedophile is 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and still getting crushes on an 8-year-old, it begins to dawn on him that, oh, he's not going to catch up. They're not going to be able to fall in love, have a relationship of equals, have children in the reproductive kind of way. Usually my experience with a pedophile is that they commit their offenses when they feel the most desperate. And it is upon this realization, when they realize that they're not going to have the kind of a life that they really wanted and that most of us expect and are even entitled to, that's really when they start feeling the most desperate. The most important part, really, for a pedophile is the same as anybody else, a sense of being connected to other people, others who share a similar experience. Now, the nature of pedophilia and the stigma about it being what it is, sometimes they can only be anonymous interactions, for example, over the internet. And for many people, that's enough.
If you happen to be a minor attracted person, hey, look up before you act. It's a fantastic group of guys that are more than happy to hear your story. And we've been through it. You know, I read a lot of new stories online, and you know, they're all so familiar still to me. You know, because wasn't that long ago, you know. Wasn't that long ago that, you know, I was a kid. You know, it wasn't that long ago that I was a teenager and realized, oh my God, this is something I'm probably going to carry with me for the rest of my life.
So that quick, I'm going to call it short story, was really impactful. Listen to this. So you're 8 years old and you've got a crush on another 8-year-old girl that's in your school, and maybe your boyfriend and girlfriend, and it's all very childlike. Then you get to 11 years old and you're still looking at the 8-year-olds, but you're only 11 years old, so you haven't got the maturity to understand that that's a thing, nothing's going on. You've got a girlfriend in your own year group, but really you're still looking at the 8-year-olds. Then you get to 13 and you're still looking at the 8-year-olds. Then 15, now you're turning into a young man and you realise, hang on a minute, there's something weird with me. There's something weird going on. I'm not like the other boys. What's happening? That probably is a truly scary place for a young man to be in. Can you even imagine that? Then you get to 17 and 19. Like, you got any... Let me just check this. Let me just ask you this question. Do you have any empathy? Let's use the word empathy for this situation. Do you have any empathy for that person in this story that we're using? Do you have any empathy when he's 11 and he is looking at the 8-year-old girls but doesn't even realise it because he's not of that maturity? Any empathy? You feel sorry for him having that situation in his head? Then when he's 13 and then 15, do you still have empathy for him? Because essentially he's still a child, he's still an underage teenager, he's under the age of consent, he's what we consider a minor in society. So let's say when he's 15 and he still recognises, oh my goodness, there's something weird with me, there's something wrong with me, I still like the 8-year-olds, why hasn't that moved on like all my mates have? Do you have empathy for him then? And then what age do you lose that? What age does it turn into anger? Or do you carry that level of empathy through all the ages, even if he's 23, 25, as long as he hasn't committed the crime yet? Next thing, this gentleman talks about there being online groups where men who can confide in each other and support each other and encourage each other, and that is called Before You Act. I haven't actually checked that out, but I know there's a couple of chat rooms or groups of people on the internet that people can go to when they're feeling desperate, like they're going to commit the crime, and these people, all anonymous, say, come on mate, don't do that, you don't want to hurt a child. And I am going to say it again, and that's that we know this isn't everyone that has this attraction. We know that this isn't everyone that has this thing in their head, this abnormality in this head. Can I call it that now that we've seen the research? The abnormality in their head. Some people don't care. I've got to say it again. Some people just don't give an F. But for the people that don't want to commit the crime and are working hard to never commit the crime, are these groups on the internet a good thing? Before we start the documentary again, minor attracted persons. I have a lot of concern with that terminology. I'm not going to get into that now. Let's continue with the documentary, but I do have something to say about that, and maybe we'll cover that at a little bit of a later stage in this video. Let's see if it gets said again.
I was contacted by a 17-year-old from Canada. He was scared because he was attracted to prepubescent boys. At one point, he said, "If you don't hear from me again, I'm considering suicide." I didn't hear from him again.
Wow.
If you want to protect children, why is there no help for these people who are sexually attracted to children? Why is there nowhere that these people can go? Why do you wait until a crime has been committed and then you go?
Oh my goodness. Like I just got to tell you who this guy is. Okay. He is the Before You Act board member, being played by an actor, but check out what he's saying here. I mean, emotions aside, surely this is just common. You know what? This is just common sense, right? Check this out. Just check this out.
If you want to protect children, why is there no help for these people who are sexually attracted to children? Why is there nowhere that these people can go? Why do you wait until a crime has been committed and then you go out and prosecute somebody? But until then, you do nothing.
My goodness.
Mike, who founded Before You Act, wasn't ashamed of his sexuality. And I try not to be. Over time, as I thought about my fantasies, it became apparent that it was really ages 12 to 14 that were the most attractive to me. A lot of people seem to think it's strange to think of boys that age as being kind and considerate and sweet. But they can be. I've met several that are.
Oh,
if sexuality is like other aspects of life, it's sort of silly to say that children aren't sexual. If children can be artistic, if they can be musical, if they have cognitive functioning, then of course they're going to be sexual. In some way.
Okay, I don't like any of this. I don't like any of this. I don't like any of this. Let's just let him finish what he's saying, and then I'm going to say things.
Mike had a fairly long-term relationship with a boy. He was arrested for it and did some prison time.
Oh my God, I'm angry.
When he got out of prison, he said he was tired of hiding this important part of who he was. In this video he made shortly before he died of emphysema, he said that to come out to people was the most important thing he ever did in his life. It was his way of being complete.
Coming out. That's the most important thing that I could ever do. It tells me that I'm alive. It tells me that I have a place in this world. What coming out means, it means that I'm not afraid. It means that I'm not afraid.
Okay, I don't like it. I don't like it. That was just the founder of Before You Act talking. I just want to comment on that bit about people who think, and I'm not going to get this completely correct, right, from what the documentary just said, but the summary in my head is children of 12 and 13, people say they can't be sexual, but they can be artistic, so therefore they can be sexual, and they actually have a sexual interest, something like that. I don't care about that viewpoint, right? We are saying that a child under the age of 16 here in England cannot consent to sexual interest. So as an adult, you have to leave them alone. You leave them alone. They are under the age of consent. In this country, you leave them alone. I don't care if you think they could be sexual, or even if they're going through puberty and they're doing sexual things with other people in their year group. I don't care about that. They don't want you. So don't go grooming them. They are under the age of consent. That doesn't mean that they cannot have sex or be in sexual situations. What that means is, as an adult, you cannot go near them. I don't care what you think about if they're sexual beings at a certain age, which is under the age of consent. If you're an adult, you do not go near them. They're the rules. And if you break those rules, we don't like you. End of.
Nick Devon was a member of Before You Act. But the group took no official position against adult child sex. So he left. By the time I contacted him, he had hired a web developer. And I'd helped him create what would become a different kind of support group for a different kind of pedophile.
Okay, what's this? My God, I can hardly take this.
Child sexual abuse is wrong. dead wrong. When I read about it, my stomach turns. This view would not be the least bit remarkable if I wasn't both romantically and sexually attracted to young girls.
Okay, this is the founder of another organisation talking here called Virtuous Paedophiles.
I'm also attracted to older females. I was married for many years and raised 3 daughters. I didn't realize the full nature of my attraction until I was in my mid-50s.
Oh,
But
this
it was
makes me
there,
feel sick, man.
all along. Pedophiles know that they are perhaps the most viscerally hated group on earth. Most take great pains to make sure their attraction remains a secret. I've walked around where everything looked gray. Absolutely everything. And then some little girl would walk by with a parent, and it would be a spot of color. The girl was color. I wasn't even dreaming of anything sexual or romantic, just her existence. Why couldn't adult women be that spot of color? For most men, that would be enough.
I don't know if I can take it. I don't know if I can take any more of this. When did we get to this? When did we arrive as like a human race? When did the brain arrive at this? It's so sexually deviant. I can hardly believe it. When did sex arrive at this? Looking at children as if they are, what he said, a spot of colour that adults cannot be, and therefore I find them sexually attractive. When did we get to this? How wrong has your brain got to be? This is inhumane. This is not humanity. This is far from a caring society. Like, when did we get to this? Has it always been this deviant, this sickening? Like, that's a malfunction of the brain. Surely, that's an uneducated malfunction of the brain. I always try to think, well, are we not doing enough? Young boys having enough conversation, because this man that's talking here, that actually made me feel like I could vomit. He was a young boy once. He was a young man once. How has he ended up at this?
I found myself with these heavy-duty suicidal thoughts. I managed to get myself admitted, and then ultimately agreed to electroconvulsive shock therapy.
Oh, wow.
Think about the situation of a teen pedophile. Society has you pegged as one of the most despicable people on the planet. If you found the courage to talk to a school counselor or see a psychotherapist, they could treat you with revulsion and report you to the police. By comparison, the outlook for gay and lesbian youth seems positively sunny.
Before I read what's on the screen, I don't think we should get into comparing an attraction to children, a sexual attraction to children, with gay and lesbians. I think that would be very dangerous, surely, to start trying to compare those to each other. I also think it's a bit dangerous, and this may be my uneducated view in terms of psychologists and people like that, but I don't even think we should call it a sexual orientation. I feel there seems like a danger to that for me, and as I learn more, I may see the pros and cons of that, but right now I don't like it. I really don't. Okay, on the screen, Virtuous Paedophiles has become the world's largest online support group for non-offending paedophiles. Non-offending
I'm not crazy
paedophiles.
about the name,
important.
but this is now a large departure from previous groups which say that they're fighting for children's rights to be sexual, but really the virtuous pedophiles are, I think, much more realistic about what it is that society is able and willing and should tolerate. These are people who realized over the course of life that they are sexually attracted to children and that they can't act on it. Essentially, they swear themselves to a life of celibacy, which is, of course, no easy thing for anybody.
The virtuous pedophiles effectively saved me. I've been very close, particularly over the last 3 years, to suicide. I thought about hanging, and I'd looked into all the details that I'd need to consider, for my weight and my height, the rope needed to be a certain length. If somebody's going through a tough time, or somebody's in a situation with a child, we can encourage people to live a non-offending life. Do I want people like Ethan Edwards and Nick Devon to come out? I would love them to come out, purely because then I could get behind them. Particularly the young people who are pedophilic. We need to be presenting role models to pedophilic people who are living good lives.
The more open
I think we're way
a
off
person
that,
can
right?
be, I think, at least for me, the more happy I am. If I can be totally open, I'm pretty happy with myself then. And I mean, I'm not saying that happy people don't do stupid things, but I think that happy people tend to not want to hurt others.
When we leave this world, we all go to the same place. The only heaven and hell that we have is here on earth. God tests everybody. And that's my test. What do I do with this body, with these feelings, with these thoughts? And so far I've made many mistakes, but I've not made, to use the Catholic term, the cardinal error of interacting with a child.
Non-offending life.
Knowing
That's
that
what we need to
pedophilia is
encourage,
biological and, as best as we can determine, unchangeable, we can stop worrying about making the problem worse. We're talking about people who cannot act out their sexual interests, without risking harm to a genuine child. So, of course, we start thinking about what the other alternatives might be. Text-based porn is an obvious one. Well, what about a doll?
Oh my goodness. Okay, the child sex doll thing. I made a YouTube video about that, only available on YouTube, not podcast, about if child sex dolls are a help or a hindrance. Will they help people get that desire out of them so that they don't actually go for a real child, or are they a hindrance because the sex doll is just a gateway into wanting the real thing? I thought it was really interesting. Maybe I need to redo that video because I did that like 2 years ago. If you go onto my channel and you type child sex dolls help or hindrance, you're going to find that. I recorded that like 2 years ago, and I've learned so much, and I talk about things in such a different way now. Maybe I need to address that But yeah, it's interesting, right? Help or hindrance. I wonder what you think.
What about a life-size doll of a child? All of a sudden, we're in a very uncomfortable position, but a very important position, in that we do need seriously to rethink, are we making the problem worse instead of better, or are we just making laws that are expensive to enforce to no foreseeable good?
Wow.
We have reached around 5,000. But if you estimate 1% prevalence for the male population in Germany, there must be 250,000 inclined men with this erotic preference for prepubescent children.
Wow.
A project like the Prevention Project Dunkelfeld and prevention projects in general are usually extremely cost-effective. Once somebody is apprehended, sent to jail, and then often civilly committed, is somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 per person per year. If a program like the Prevention Project Dunkelfeld prevents even just a small handful of cases, it would very, very easily pay for itself.
Okay, the words on the screen. In 2013, Prevention Project Dunkelfeld launched a national awareness
Schon früh habe ich
campaign.
gemerkt, dass ich anders ticke. War schon klar, wie man über solche wie mich denkt. Krank.
Oh, I'm sorry for those that are listening. It's in a different
Dachte ich ja auch.
language.
Dabei habe ich meine Fantasie noch nie ausgelebt.
Durch die Therapie habe ich gelernt, niemand ist schuld an seiner sexuellen Neigung.
Aber jeder verantwortlich für sein Verhalten. Ich will kein Täter werden.
Präventive Therapie verhindert sexuellen Kindesmissbrauch.
Here's the words on the screen. At 1% prevalence, Canada would be home to 160,000 paedophiles. Okay, volunteers keep offenders from reoffending, offering them around the clock
Sometimes
support.
people say, well, why would you want to provide support for somebody who's committed some pretty heinous offenses, sexually, often against very vulnerable people or children? And that's a good question. The reason that a circle of support and accountability is there is to make sure that that individual buys into the bottom line of a circle of support and accountability, which is that there be no more victims.
Peterborough is the home to 124 registered sex offenders, one of 15 places across Canada where circles of support and accountability operate.
So we've got a parole officer, a police officer, a realtor, and the list goes on. It's meant to be an illustration of the community being here for you, supporting you, as well as holding you accountable.
We're all here because we want you to succeed. We don't want to see you reoffend. We don't want you to go back to prison.
So these circles hold these offenders accountable for not reoffending, and that police officer that's in that circle, they're all volunteers, says, we want to see you succeed. And it's almost like this a weird choice of language, isn't it? But we want offenders to succeed in not offending again. No more victims. No more victims. That's what we're after.
There are people who have children, very young children, who say to me, if I couldn't do everything possible to make this world a safer place to live for my child, then what am I doing really on behalf of my child? When you provide positive pro-social individuals to interact with somebody coming from prison, the rate of sexual reoffense goes down by upwards of 70 to 75% compared to people who don't have a circle of support in very similar circumstances.
Wow. After being introduced in over 7 different countries, these circles was defunded by the Canadian government in 2014. My goodness.
We fought like crazy for him. I didn't think that they would just automatically take him because he was adopted at the time.
Okay, this is the guy that has the foster child and got caught with 25 images of children, pornographic images of children, and charged and sentenced for 48 months in prison.
Our last visit with him was kind of a goodbye visit. Extremely tough for me. Extremely tough for Lori.
But surely it's got to be that way.
For my wife. But his social worker actually took me aside and said to me, she sat me down and said, Bobby, this situation is horrible. But I do know that you did not touch him in any sexual way. And I broke down right there, because that's all I had been telling people all along. And, if they would have understood that, to begin with, and just said, okay, you know what? You broke the law. Okay, if you have to go to jail or if you have to go to prison, so be it. Why take him out of a home where he was extremely happy?
No, mate. No, mate. No. You were caught looking at indecent images of children, images of a sexual nature on your computer. Yes, let's get that foster child that you take care of out of your house ASAP, because we're not running the risk. You can tell us as much as you like that you've got no interest in him, but we don't take the risk with that. You've been convicted of an offence. We now need to get all children away from you, because we cannot risk that one day you may fall over. One day you may give in to that temptation. You may think you're strong for 99% of the time, but that one time something may trigger you. You may be having a bad day. I don't know what the circumstance would need to be, but we get children away from you if you've been convicted, right? Your life isn't going to be the same anymore if you've been convicted. You don't get the rights and the normal life that others get when you've committed a sexual crime against a child, whether that be online or in person. That's the rules, mate. That's the rules. So don't get all sad that your foster kid has been taken out of your care. Yes, he may have been having a great life with you, but now he's at risk. You should have thought about that before you committed the crime against a child. There's got to be some lines here. And if you cross them, we're not happy.
To assume that all paedophiles are going to act on their impulses would suggest that all male adults are rapists or potential rapists.
What?
Society, in their ignorance, they say, well, if you have a paedophilic tendency, you're going to do something. Inevitably, at some time in your life, you are going to sexually interact with a child. I've had this conversation with people. I've said to them, look, I'm attracted to little girls. And it's, when are you going to do something about it then? Inevitably you're going to act on this. And I'm like, no.
Hating and pushing away and driving out is the easiest thing in the world to do. The hardest thing in the world to do is to look at someone who is afflicted with pedophilia and find there some room for compassion. Not everybody can. But if you look deeply, if you look really hard, you'll find the human being in there.
If I've ever been on a roller coaster of emotions before, that was it. That made me feel 100 ways. Like 100 ways. There's so many things in that documentary that are facts over feelings. There's so many things in that documentary that are common sense, but there's a few things in there that I don't like. But what an incredible thing to actually see it from the person that has committed the crime or hasn't committed the crime but feels tempted to. And I know we're talking about a select portion of these criminals, but or these people that have this in their head, but wow. And now we've just got our fingers crossed. If you're actually watching along with this on YouTube, that James Canton, clinical psychologist, we have our fingers crossed that this interview with him is going to go through. I'm planning to do it in the next couple of weeks. He said yes to it. I hope I can get him on because I've got so many. I just think it's going to be an incredible conversation with him. Like, I wonder how you feel. I wonder if you were thinking a certain way at the start of this video or this podcast, and now you're thinking differently. I wonder if this has changed you in any way, or I wonder if it has only reinforced what you already thought about these people or the situation or society or how we're going to handle this, or if we're doing it completely wrong at the moment. Are we making the problem worse? That's what they said in the documentary, right? Are they making the problem worse? Now, please, if you feel angry towards me because I even did this, because I even reviewed this documentary, please don't. Please don't feel angry towards me because of this. I'm just trying to investigate the situation from all angles, because I was a child that was sexually abused in a horrific way when I was 8 years old. Oral sex, kissing, fondling, masturbation, the lot. He was 25. I don't want that to happen to another child. It's happening to children all the time right now. And unless we start just investigating and talking and understanding people who have done research, understanding people who have got real lived experience, and just all coming together to find the best solutions as quickly as possible, then we're not going to get anywhere with this. And I fear that the birth of the internet has only accelerated this crime. We are in the Stone Ages with this conversation. When are we going to get up to speed on this? Because otherwise we're just going to keep getting more and more victims. This is crazy. So please don't just be angry at me if you are feeling anger towards me. We're trying to get this conversation evolved. We're trying to evolve this conversation. So I hope that this brought you at least something to think about. And even though I definitely do feel nervous reviewing videos like this, I also am going to continue doing that, because my mission, as it is your mission, is to stop there being so many victims and to allow children to have the playful childhood that they deserve and that it is their right to have, not to be around adults that are looking at them to see whether they can groom them for an opportunity for a sexual interaction. We want to stop that, and here we're trying to do that. Thank you so much for joining me on this. Wow.